Welcome to What the Frac. We are your fractional team, and today we break down marketing trends, strategies, and tactics in 30 minutes or less so that you can do the fun stuff like be creative.
Hi, Tamara.
Nicole, we've been off for a few weeks.
We have been off for a few weeks, and it's funny because this is probably going to air a few weeks after we've recorded it. But this is our first recording back after Web Summit. If you haven't checked out our content around Web Summit, I'm sure it's already out by the time this airs. So go check that out. But we're back.
We're back, and we have a topic that everyone is talking about right now. So, Nicole, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What is your least favorite part about owning a business?
Ooh, really setting me up here. Because I know what the topic we're going to talk about today is, I think you're leading me here, Tamara. But I think for most business owners, when I talk to business owners, their least favorite is anything that has to do like admin, financials, like dealing with that. I personally like dealing in that space, but I know a lot of business owners don't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the numbers part can be the one thing that trips people up. And that is why when I met today's guest, I said, you have to come on our show. So let me introduce her. So our today's guest is Jessica. She's a fractional CFO who lives at the intersection of fintech and finance strategy with expertise across Square, Amazon, and Amex. She translates messy financials into clear operational insight. She sits in the room with big investor conversations when they happen and helps startups to build systems of record that actually scale. So if you want practical ways to balance growth and margin, this is your episode to listen to. And full transparency, I met her at San Francisco Startup Week and we hit it off. We talked for a very long time and I said, come on our show. So let's dig into this conversation.
This is a topic that's so needed. I'm going to add Jessica to the stage here. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
All right.
To be here.
Ready to jump in?
Ready.
Well, so
all right.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you first, before we dig into like the practical, actionable advice. You are a fractional CFO, but you've got an extensive background with corporations. What made you make the leap into the fractional hustle?
Yeah, I think it was a number of different things. First, it was a little bit of a kick. I had recently left Square, and it was kind of like my third big name. My LinkedIn was starting to be like ex Amex, ex Amazon, ex Square, kind of like running out of space. And also, I was really enjoying the building and scrappiness there. And then, you know, in like a strange turn of affairs, there's so many times in your life when people are like, you can't do that thing that you want to do. You can't do that thing you want to do. And like a number of people kept saying, like, have you thought about fractional CFO? Because I was telling people that I was interested in being with startups. I like being scrappy. I like building. And I'm like, all right, I got to look into this. And then once I started working with a few clients, I was like, this is really fun. Like there's chaos and I'm bringing order to the chaos. And, you know, also like a portfolio approach as well of like, you know, 4 or 5 different chaotic founders or CEOs. I don't have to get on perfectly with all of them. And so a little bit of a portfolio diversified approach. And I would say those 2 things. And then just being able to like see the impact so much more immediately, like going from 0 to something, as opposed to going from something that's working somewhat well to something that's working even better. It's just like, it's a kind of like a buzz and a high that I really enjoy.
So, you know, it's really interesting, the fractional world. I want to kind of talk about this a little bit before we jump into the finance part of it, because when we started this podcast, Tamara and I were like, no one knows what fractional is. It's a very niche thing. It's going to be the future. We want to be at the forefront of like talking about fractional, especially for startups. Really, corporate was doing it a little bit more, but startups weren't as much. And so we kind of got into it. And now that we've been in this bubble, we know that people know what fractional is. They know the word and the terminology. But what I learned over the last few weeks is that people don't actually know what fractionals do and how to like implement them. And so because even fractionals, it's such a new industry and a new topic, they're a little bit you know, we saw this at when we were down in Tucson, Tamara, where our panel, we wanted to give business advice and everyone wanted to know how to become a fractional and like, what are the guardrails of being a fractional, right? I think there's a lot of like, it's the like unknown territory of what does a fractional do? How do you implement them into your company? I even had an investor last week ask me about this, like, how do you implement fractional? So I guess my question to you, that was my long-winded way of saying, tell everyone like what does a fractional CFO do? And like, how can they put that in their business?
Yeah, I would say like a fractional to me in general, so broadly, and you guys can talk more about like what does it mean in your areas, but it's where you want like a senior level perspective, but you don't have, it's not wise for your business to hire someone very senior at that time, or you've already, you know, got enough seats at the table. So various kind of structural reasons that you don't need a full-time person right at that moment. But you want that kind of senior level visibility. I think especially for finance, there's like a lot of different ways that finance can be supportive, but you got your consultants and they are delivering a service, and you maybe get a bespoke service, or maybe you get like a package of a service, but like a fractional is almost always going to be bespoke. You might even have a fractional like manage people. Like you might have like a full-time employee who's relatively junior who reports into a fractional leadership, fractional leader. And I think like in my world, specifically getting over to fractional CFOs, you would often hire a fractional CFO if you've got an accountant and the CEO is like, I am tired of managing my account. I don't want to have this direct interaction. Like they're asking me questions that maybe I don't know the answer to. And also like, I feel like I'm not getting as much out of them as I feel like I should. Your fractional CFO will manage your outsourced accountants, your bookkeepers. They'll help you get insights and they'll help you like drive your business as opposed to just kind of check a box of a service that you needed done.
I think that was a really good way of putting it, especially for financial, right? I think that like obviously the CEO and the people in charge need to know the financials and the cash flow and all the stuff, but then generally they don't even know how to calculate that or run that report, and they don't know what they don't know to like, you know, tell the accountants, tell the bookkeepers what to do. And the same thing for marketing. I know, Tamara, we've talked about the same thing for like marketing or COO, is that it's really that space. I think a lot of people are thinking of it like a consultant. The difference is a consultant's going to be your outside eyes. They're going to give you a PDF with their findings. They're going to give you their recommendations, and then they're hands off. A fractional is going to be much more integrated into your team, and they're going to be much more kind of doing the day-to-day. So I think that was a really good, thank you for that, a really good way of explaining a CFO version of what we do.
What I love about it too is like, it's funny that you're the money person. So you're telling them that you don't need me full time. So it's like, it's really great to have that sort of, I don't know, like push and pull of like, you are looking for employment and for work, but you're saying, no, not full time, because you can't afford that right now.
It almost gets to like what I think the role of a fractional CFO is. You have like a fiduciary responsibility, and your responsibility is like not even really to the CEO. It's almost to the board, like who you may or may not even like know, but your responsibility is to help the business be the best business. And like, yes, you're working with the CEO, who's likely the one who's bringing in the fractional leader. But you're like, you know, available and ready to like kind of help balance the CEO and kind of be that external source of like almost even more senior leadership, or representative of the board as much.
So if someone is watching, like a lot of our audience is business owners, or they are at that like senior level of a company, if they're watching and they're like, okay, two questions. One, what is like some clear signs that I should bring in a CFO, whether that is fractional or not? And then two, like, what are some things I can do to kind of get my company ready so that when that CFO comes in, we are hitting the ground running, or we're getting the most out of the engagement?
Maybe I'll answer the second part first, because I almost think you don't need that much to get ready. Like, I think as long as you're ready to go, if you're ready to share some information, which like really, that's it. And I think like get ready to like have like a conversation about scope. I don't know if we're getting into like horror stories, but I feel like the only horror stories that come, not the only, but my horror stories are like when you don't have like a good scope and you don't have like a good, what are we here to do? Like, just be ready to like have that interaction. And I think like, how do you know that you're ready? Are you like, as a leader, are you spending more time in your financials than you want to? Are you having trouble managing your bookkeeper? Are you feeling like there's like an almost just like any opportunity? Like I actually kind of think like a fractional CFO, I work at the very early stages, like, and I even have some clients who don't even have products yet. But I'm still helping them make sure that they're ready to go when their product is ready, that they're that they've got like the right financial plan, and that they're like even looking at their runway before they've got that product launched. So I almost think like the clear sign is like if you have a pain that needs to be resolved, but I don't think there's like a checkbox of like, here's a checkbox of you don't need a fractional CFO. I just think like the engagement is going to be very different depending on what your needs are.
Got it.
And maybe the only thing, I know that you also have a lot of, small business owners who listen and, maybe are like startups who have decided to kind of keep it small and aren't interested in that scaling. I think if they're happy with their finance and they're happy with their accountant and they feel like they are, satisfied just keeping going. Like I'm not saying like every business needs a fractional CFO, but I'm just saying like it could be in a number of different environments.
Mm.
And so you work with a lot of startups, and that's been actually something that Nicole and we've been talking to a lot of startups the last month, 2 months. And obviously I'm a startup as well. So I'm curious, you do that 0 to 1 phase. When is it that you come into a company and like, when should a startup founder have you come in? Because I'm guessing you probably come in a lot after some problems happen, or the founder is like, okay, what do I do now? Right? Like, how do we prevent that point of being like, fix my problem and more of the, hey, come in and help me form my strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think is like I sometimes come in when a founder has already engaged with an accountant and is like just looking to get more, like an outsourced accountancy, like the various service providers that are out there. But I do think like coming in early on, there's always going to be a mess, and it might be a mess of like, oh, you've like launched a product, but you don't have an operating model. So like building a first operating model, like, do you need an operating model? Do you need someone to help you with your outsourced services? Do you have questions that you just can't answer, or are you getting confused? Like, and I almost think sometimes like a CFO is like an educator, like we're like a chef.
I could hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I checked the whole thing kind of turned into a little circle. I was just saying, want to be sure that I'm answering your question and I not just kind of giving the pitch for a fractional CFO in general.
Well, I think, like what I see a lot, and Nicole and I experienced this in marketing, where it's like the plans are made before the marketing department is brought in, right? And a lot of times it's like, you need these foundational people in while the strategy is being put in place. And I mean, maybe just because that's the world that I lived in was marketing mostly, I'm very much like, oh, marketing is coming early. Is that the same with the, with the finance, with the CFO? Do you feel that? And like, what problems can you avert if you do bring in someone early? Because I know with marketing, Nicole and I are like, there's tons of problems that you avert when you just bring marketing into the conversation.
And even just to like jump in, because this is kind of the question I had too, Tamara, was like, because I've seen it with pitch decks, right? So like when startups are pitching and I'm looking at the budget they're asking for, and marketing like is generally way too low. And I'm like, wait, have you worked with an advisor on marketing? They're like, no, we're not ready to go to market yet. I think it's the same thing. I was
to see, and you've got $50,000 for ad spend over the next year.
Yeah, and exactly. And so I think the same thing with like financials. I was going to ask you, like, I hear on a daily basis when I work with startups, it's like, oh, but those future numbers, I mean, we don't have any sales yet, so they're basically just imaginary and made up. Is that a myth? Like, should we be working with a CFO at that point to look at future numbers and things like, for our pitch deck and like our burn rate and our what we're asking for from investors and things like that?
I guess so. Although when I think of finance, there's two pieces. There's the past truth and then the future estimates. And the future estimates are always going to be a forecast, and they're always going to be a guess. And you just like your audience, whether they're investors or if it's your board or just like, someone who's like an operator who's just going to have to be like, oh, this is unrealistic. Like, I think those people just need to be empowered to call out that the future looks unrealistic. I think like the way that a CFO would partner, I guess like that's the other thing, like an outsourced accountancy, or they're almost always just looking at the past actuals and helping make sure that that is buttoned up, and you need that buttoned up. But the future, like I kind of like the environment where you're litigating and reevaluating and taking a closer look at that operating model. I guess like maybe the one difference is a CFO isn't signing up for any kind of outcomes in the way that a marketer, you're like, they're like promising these leads and I don't think I can execute and I don't think I can deliver. Like the CFO is the one who's like helping challenge those assumptions and just put the best assumptions into place. And maybe even new drivers are needed, and that's the whole point. There's a new whole model needed to like put in a totally different way of looking at things. And in that sense, I kind of see the CFO as like a very much high level. And this is why I love the strategic piece of it. And it's like, because it's like truly the business strategy is the financial strategy.
Yeah, you keep saying operating model. And I think we all know what that means here, but for the people who don't, no, but really we have business owners who may not even know what an operating model is. What exactly is this operating model you keep talking about?
Yeah, your operating model is taking what you understand is the truth of today and putting it into your future expectations. So I guess like in finance terms, an operating model is like a 3-statement financial model, a P&L of your revenues expected, your expenses expected, your operating profit. And then your operating model will also have your balance sheet as well as your cash flow forecast, which is cash is king. It's like small businesses, actually, that's the most important piece of all, and startups as well, making sure that the runway is in there. But I've come in and built that first model and they're like, no, we know what our revenues are going to be. We know what our customer forecast is going to be. And I'm like, all right, I put it all into place. And I'm like, there was one client I had where I was like, hey, did you realize you were spending all this money on marketing, but then your customers churn really frequently at the end of 1 week? And so have you thought about spending half as much on marketing, but like focusing on the customers that won't churn? And then here's what that impact would be to your revenues and profit and cash flow. And they were like, oh my God. And it was like, it's not like it was an aha moment for them, but only because they hadn't looked at the model all in one place.
Yeah. And cash flow, I think, is Tamara, I don't know if you've dealt with this, but I don't want to say startup because a lot of times they're pre-revenue, but with small business, I've met so many business owners who A, don't know what a P&L is, and B, which is okay, I guess, probably not, but B, the more concerning part to me is they don't know what their cash flow is. Like you said, they know what is expected to come in this year, what came in last year, and what goes out, but they don't know what the cash flow. And when I implemented cash flow analysis into my company, like the way I hire, the way I invest back into the company, the way I make decisions has changed dramatically because I know kind of the estimate of what should be coming in each month versus what's coming in overall, and just like saying, okay, if we're making $250,000 this year, let's divide that by 12, because every business owner knows that like it's not going to be equal the whole time. Have you seen that in startup, Tamara?
Oh my God. I mean, yes. And what you're making me think of too is like, I was thinking back to my past experience of just like trying to get everything in a dashboard and then having all the departments be separate, right? So in startups sometimes, and even in big corporations that I've worked in, every department is reporting separately. And so what you just said about the churn was the problem, not the customer acquisition. And so that should go to product, and some money should be going to product versus to ad spend. I mean, that's the magic part of designing systems that work, right? And when companies don't do that, because those are two separate departments, that's marketing. And then the churn is actually probably more product that needs to work on something, right? And customer service. And so if you don't have that holistic look, and if you don't have the foresight to have these departments talking to each other, you're not going to solve the problem. And so it's funny because you think that that's more of almost the CEO's job, not the CFO's job. But you coming in and shining a light on that, especially in small teams, that's where problems are solved. I don't know, Nicole.
Well,
What do you think?
I was going to say, I think that that's the difference between a C-level and an executional anything, right? Like you're even talking, Jessica, about the CFO versus the accountant or the bookkeeper, right? Even in marketing, it is the C-level versus the director or the social media manager or whatever. They can pull together all those numbers, but the C-level is really the ones who are looking at it holistically and how do they work together and can troubleshoot through. And that's where I think fractionals are going to be so important, because even if you don't need a CFO or a CMO, 365 days of the year, having them in those meetings and having them in quarterly or bi-yearly to like build out the plans and to look at all this stuff and say, oh, hey, you just said we're spending all this money on marketing. We're not seeing that come through the funnel properly. Why? Most people are going to spend more money putting more in the top of the funnel versus like, hey, let's tweak this little piece over here. And that's really what a C-level, that's what an executive is brought in for. That's why you pay the high prices for an executive in there. I don't know. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
I want to bring up one more thing with you, because you've talked about the rule of 40, balancing top line growth with profitability and margin expansion. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. And actually, maybe even just to bridge what we were just talking about with that is like, I feel like the finance role is a journalist. Like we come in and we're like, it's kind of like all the news that's fit to print. Like we decide what we're going to show you, and then we kind of have a conversation based on that. But like, I may not write the story about the marketing, or I may not write the story about these other things. So like choosing what numbers to look at and what financials are important. And kind of to your point, like I think the overarching goal of a lot of, every startup and a lot of small businesses is this thing called the rule of 40. And so what that is, I think it was coined, I don't know, a decade ago by, a big consultancy, but it's a combination of your revenue growth rate and your margins, your profit margins. So your profit margins being like a kind of past truth, like today's state of affairs, and then your revenue growth. And you want those two numbers to be equal or greater than 40. So for a lot of startups, they're burning money. They're like losing money. Their operating margins are really low. They're going through it. Like, let's say they have negative 100 margins, but they're growing 2x. Their revenues are growing 2x. So 200 plus the negative 100, that's together a rule of 100. They're in good shape. A small business that's maybe more mature might have revenue growth of maybe just like 10%, nominal revenue growth year over year. But if they've got that, in order to be, truly healthy and not be kind of burning through cash, the rule of thumb is their profit margins should be at least 30%. And that would tell you that they are a healthy rule of 40 business. And I think like that is overall, like then it tells you, all right, well, where should we be looking? Do we like where our margins are? Do we like where our revenue growth is? If we don't like where our revenue growth is, bring in like yourselves, CMOs, chief growth officers, people who can help get those revenues. Or do we need to change the product? Is there feedback happening across the board that like, is the product not resonating? Is that fit kind of too small and too narrow? And then, on the counter side, like if you've got like great revenue growth of 40%, but your profit margins are negative still, like, okay, well now we're getting into like, nominal territory. Startups tend to have like an X factor, burning money, but growing at some sort of an X. Small businesses are going to be a lot more sensitive. And also, of course, like this is something that a lot of investors will look at to determine if you're like a great startup that's deserving of like the next round of funding. Small businesses may be, fully satisfied to, be a rule of 30 company and just, hang out like that for a long time. You definitely don't want to be a rule of 0 company is, you don't want to get down to that, and obviously not negative, that's a immediate fire drill.
So for all my business owners who are, and startup founders and executives who are listening, who are like me, where as soon as you start saying numbers, my eyes glaze over and I don't know what's going on. I'm going to just repeat this and make sure I understand properly.
Okay.
Because I think what you just said is like the silver bullet here that we really need, right? So, which is basically the same way in marketing, we have multiple levers to pull to kind of, do you want more top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, like conversion rates, the whole thing. You have that in finance that you should be looking at. And basically, you should be looking at the numbers and saying, okay, there's basically two levers, which is that profit margin lever and the revenue lever, right? And I think that most businesses look a lot, especially small businesses, look at that revenue lever and they kind of miss the profit margin lever. So that I think this is like a big piece that is going to be huge for them right here. And basically what you're trying to say is that a healthy company or a company that is growing, you know, pretty stably, but also is making some money is probably going to be at some of that like 10 to 20% growth on the revenue side. And they're going to be kind of on that 40%, 30 to 40% profit margin side, which means that you are bringing in 30 to 40% more than you're spending to make the product. Correct? Okay, perfect. And then once you know what piece is not working properly or that you want to tweak, that's how you start to figure out who you bring in to help you tweak that strategy to make that better. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. But it's beyond just like, I think a lot of small businesses may focus on their revenues or may focus on their margins. And the rule of 40 is really a combination of today and tomorrow. So today, how are your margins? Are you good? Are you like, do you have excellent, crazy margins, but you're not? Then great. Then actually like forget about tomorrow. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you don't have those great margins, but you're like, but tomorrow we're gonna double our company. We don't have good margins because we're investing for the future. It's a combination of like today and investment for the future. Like you want to, and the rule, and 40 is kind of just a rule of thumb that a lot of investors like still. But they're looking to be sure that you've got that growth, which is like usually more of the lever you can pull. You can only cut your costs. You can only cut your costs so much. So you like generally you want to bias towards hitting your rule of 40 with some good revenues. Wow. Did that make sense? Did that put it together?
It does. It absolutely does. I think this is, you know, the reason I wanted to really make sure that people got it is because startup founders tend to be a little bit more sensitive to the numbers because on a daily basis, when they're pitching to investors, when they're talking to investors, when they're trying to find funding, they are asked about numbers constantly. And whether they understand them or not is a whole nother story, but they are constantly being asked about their numbers. Whereas a lot of small business owners, which is kind of where my background is in and really working with, they are looking at what QuickBooks spits out as like what we are looking to bring in versus what we're spending. And that's basically a lot of the numbers they're looking at. And so when they start to try to figure out how do we grow, which is really why we started this podcast, is to teach them that, they kind of throw spaghetti at a wall. You know what I mean? And so I think that those numbers and knowing those levers are there is so important to getting them out of this cycle of we need to grow, which means we need to bring in more people. But like just changing your pricing structure or making your profit margin a little bit healthier, like those could be levers that take less effort and make such an impact so quickly. And I've seen it happen. We just had a client who increased their pricing by, I think it was $10 a service, which is not a ton. But they went from bleeding a little bit of money every month to breaking even. And now they can like focus on growth, right? They're not stressed. So I just think it's so important.
Yeah. And startups are just such a different animal because all the money goes back into growth, right? Especially in the beginning phases. And that's what the investors want to see. So you're right. You're like talking about a totally different margin there than you are with a small business. So interesting. So before you leave, I want to ask one more question that I'm always fascinated with, which is what is the most interesting trend that you're seeing in your industry right now?
So a couple of years ago, there was this trend of like the CFO suite kind of being a hot topic. Like, you know, we've got automation and there were all these startups, the Brexes and Ramps of the world that were super small startups. And they were helping the finance suite be optimized. I think a really interesting trend is like now those startups are the big companies and there's like so many options and opportunities for innovation in managing the financials. And there's also now we're getting to a point where there's like almost a consolidation of the like the fintechs that were startups are now the big players, and the legacy players are almost, they're more just like the larger B2B service provider. So I guess I'm seeing, like, in my world, in the fintech and the finance world, I'm seeing a lot of really proven startups that are now getting the benefit of like a consolidation, and the industry just being totally different today than it was 5 years ago.
It's wild how fast that can happen in startups. And now we're about to see the AI boom. So we'll
Yeah.
see what happens with that.
Yeah.
So how can people get in touch with you if they would like to talk to you about CFO services?
Yeah, great. Well, you can find me. I have a personal website of www.thepaygal.com, or you can email me at hello@thepaygal.com.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. I'm sure we'll have future questions. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Maybe we'll have Jessica back on to answer them. Finance is definitely a topic that is on the top of a lot of people's minds, and they are a little confused by it. But if you are not part of our community, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to listen on anywhere that you listen to podcasts. That includes Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and anywhere else. And then we are on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, all of the places. Join us in our community. Lots of big things happening as we go into 2026 and the future. Tamara, happy to be back.
I know. I'm so thrilled to be back. Although we were in person, it was so nice to be in person.
So nice.
Love that. So we will see everybody next week. Jessica, thank you so much.